Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to the City of Farmers Branch City Council Study Session for Tuesday, June 23rd. Our first item of business is item A1, which is to discuss regular agenda items. And I'll start on my left with Councilman Roman. I can come back if you'd like.
I'm sorry?
I can come back.
Oh, no, I'm good. I just needed it's a long agenda, so I had to scroll down. So I have a question regarding H15.
H15?
Right. I'd like to know when this project might begin and what type of traffic interruption, if any, might we anticipate, and how long the project will be under construction.
This is just a design phase, so we'll be doing construction till after this. First, we gotta fully design the project, so this contract is just for the design. Due to the fact it's a crosswalk, I would think it'd be a pretty short duration. We have not talked to bidders yet about the timeline for the project, because we're just doing the design. But they'll be moving the median nose back a little bit, moving the signal itself has to move. This creates a connection to the West Side Art Trail to the John Burke Main Street there. What we're doing here to create the pedestrian crossing across that.
So once the design phase is completed, are we talking about a potential maybe year or 2 year before we see any kind of movement
No,
there?
we haven't set up for this year. Well, what's gonna take the longest part, in my opinion, is the advanced funding agreement with TxDOT. That's the next phase for us. We're working on that now. Let's try to get it AFA done. We'll bring that back for your approval, which secures the funding in place. The funding's only for construction.
Okay.
No funding for design. So, once we get them under design, we can ask Kimberly more details about how long they think the project will actually take, and give you more detailed answer next time.
Okay.
Project comes back for your review.
Sounds good. Thank you. And then I also have a question about H18. I figured that might be you. So I know that we're removing references of PD 99 and PD 100. I just want to make sure that the way that we are going to be, I guess, referring to that Mercer Crossing area includes every residential home out there.
Yeah, so what this does by taking it out of the ordinance, all the service frequency and service level will be determined by the city manager.
Okay.
So that's what I'm trying to do, is give you as many options in the future as possible. We don't have to come back and make another change to the ordinance. This clears any of those hurdles, because with the CWD contract, we're discussing service frequency tonight. So we're looking for direction on that.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to remove all those hurdles with this ordinance change.
Councilman, could I tail on that one, since we're on H18? So this $1.6 million budget impact, which is forecasted here.
So you're talking about the J1 item?
Hey,
That's CWD contract.
okay, is that an increase of 1.8, or is that what it will increase to?
That's what it increased to. The delta is much smaller.
Okay, that's what I thought.
We'll get into that at the J1 discussion.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure that we had capacity in our revenues from the landfill revenue side of things to absorb that additional cost.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it's a matter of, we just more back to the general fund budget, so we'll have to discuss that a little bit tonight about, because there is a delta between what I budgeted this year versus what projected revenues would be if the council decides to go for twice a week.
Right.
So we discussed with Candy before we go forward with that. So there's a couple different options, and we talked number one, and we start in June 1, and that's, we'll discuss it downstairs.
Okay. Yeah, I want to make sure that we're communicating that fully so people understand it. And, it's our goal, make sure that we're communicating and being very transparent about these things. So, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Bennett?
Councilman Roman covered the H8, 15, and 18 that I was going to ask, so that works. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Merritt?
There certainly is a lot on the agenda this evening. As we've already discussed, a number of consent agenda items, but I don't have anything that hasn't already been addressed, so thank you.
Okay. And I'll go ahead and tell you now, just so you can be prepared. Item A9 is going to move to regular agenda, and that will become item J5. So A9 becomes J5. And then item A10 is going to be tabled till the next meeting, since that was Councilman Jackson's request, and he's not able to be here at study session today, so we'll take that up at the next meeting. Okay. Next up is item A2, which is a presentation from the city's bond council to discuss the 2024 bond election, the timeline of events, and compliance with the Texas law related to a bond election.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Jawaria Tareen. I'm your Deputy City Manager, and I have our Bond Counsel, Rob Collins, here today. During our bond discussions, you have had some questions, and we requested our Bond Counsel to come in, answer those questions, and speak to us about bond and the media policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, city manager. Rob Collins, is always my privilege to be here. It's hard to believe. I think it's over almost 25 years I've had the opportunity to work with the city on bond council and several elections over the years. So thank you for allowing me to be here. And I did want to just kind of walk over, since you don't have a bond election every year, I'd like to kind of educate and help you understand kind of what the do's and don'ts are once you've called the election. So under Texas law, you cannot spend or authorize spending of public funds for political advertising. That's once you call the election, that though you're bound by those rules, and a violation of that is also a misdemeanor under the election code. So what does political advertising mean? Any type of communication you can think of would fit, whether it's supporting or opposing either side of a ballot measure, which is your proposition, and it can be spoken, written, email, social media, anything you can think of that where you're communicating to the public would fit within the rules for political advertising. Yes, sir.
So does the timeline on that start once the bond election is called?
Yes, sir. So
Okay, so if any individual had expressed an opinion one way or the other prior to the calling of that, then they're not in violation.
that's correct.
Thank you.
And I'll also get into some other, at the end, kind of what you do on your own time, because I think that's important to understand as well, because there's two pieces of it. One is, are you speaking for or against the bond proposition? The second one is, you're only in violation if you're spending public funds. So public funds, though, is as broad as you can possibly think. It's not just city money. So any use of any city employee's time during work hours, an email, a phone call from a city phone, a city vehicle, a fax, you don't have a whole lot of those these days, internal mail, a poster board inside City Hall. The rule of thumb is, if you're in a city facility, just assume that you are spending public money, because it takes public funds to operate that facility. So what can you say about a bond election? Because when you call the election, you want to educate your citizens about what is included in the proposition. So the amount of the bonds, a tax rate, a general description of the projects, the estimated amounts to be spent, the demographics of the city, prior election results, all are facts, and we'll be working with your city team to make sure that anything you want to put out kind of fits within that factual, descriptive authorization. Starting in the 2021 election, you're also now required to put together a voter information document. That's a very specific document that is set out in statute and basically will say, here's the amount of debt you have for a $100,000 homestead in the city. You can provide a bunch of other additional information. In fact, I'm sure you will, about the tax rate impact on, the average home or other information. But this is a document that is set by the legislature as to something that has to be included and has to be posted on your website, 21 days before the election. Generally, we'll have a form of that for you guys before you actually call the bond election, but that's just a statutory requirement. And then, of course, it makes, probably goes without saying, but it's illegal to provide information that you know to be false. So what are things you can't say? And I recognize this goes against kind of what you're thinking, because you wouldn't be calling a bond election if you didn't think these were things that were needed or would make the city, better. But these are all things that have been found by the Ethics Commission to be in violation of the rules against political advocacy. Vote yes for a brighter future. This bond will ensure future generations will have access to the best facilities. Let's build a better city. Show you care about our community. Please support our vision. All of these items are things that have been found to be in violation by the Ethics Commission. So how do you make sure you're not doing that? One, we're happy to always, help review information along with your city attorney and your city team. But anytime you're using a comparative term, better, best, brighter, smarter, we need this, newer, cleaner, more, most, that will always get you in trouble when you're talking about the factual. Even though I know you're going to believe that, if you're building a new park, for instance, it's going to be newer, better, the best. So the fewer adjectives when you're using city money, the better. And slogans and calls to action, support the city, or, help support our vision for the community. Those are all things that will get you in trouble if that kind of is part of the information you put out, because it's deemed not to be a factual. You're trying to encourage people to vote yes through a positive impression, or, the reverse is also true, but we generally think about this only, on the positive side. As I said, anytime you have a question, you can always call me. You can't ever stop someone from filing a complaint with the Ethics Commission. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we keep it as factual as possible, so that it would have to be, a bad faith, claim from someone if they wanted to come in and file a complaint. Just a note on the knowledge qualifier, because this is really interesting. In 2019, the Ethics Commission came in and said, even in a situation where a city attorney reviewed a video that was prepared for the city for a bond election and signed off on it, the Ethics Commission said, well, they were wrong. It didn't stop the culpability. The city was still found to be in violation, even though it kind of mitigated some of the damages, the fine from the city. But just so you know, this is something really important and to take notice of, and make sure that we try to do the best job we can of only providing factual information. And again, please call us anytime. I also want to make clear that the city, especially like the council, not a paid position, on your own time, with your own resources, you're perfectly able to say your opinion about the bond election. So if you're speaking at the Rotary or a church group or a community group, you can say that your position for or against the bond election, but as long as you're not spending public dollars to do it. So, this is all that, clear distinction. I do think, like, for some of the city officers, like the city manager, it's difficult, in my opinion. The safest thing is not to take a position, because as city manager, you're always on duty, right? You're never, people don't ever think you have your free time. You're just, you're the city manager and you're responsible. So if they call you at 10 o'clock at night, you're on duty. And of course, the Political Action Committee, if there are, civic groups for or against, they can say whatever they want, for or against election, but they're not spending public dollars. That's their own dollars, so they don't fall under the political advisory and prohibition against spending public funds. I think I'm sorry, so one final one. This is really not about advocacy, but usually when we have a bond election, you're describing the projects. We want to make sure that we don't unexpectedly create a contract with the voters. So when you're talking about the projected project for, let's say, a park, you might say it's anticipated to include this, or the cost is expected to be this, because there's always things you don't know about today. So while the expectations are this is going to include all these things, when the pricing comes in, some things may change slightly. So that predicts to, plans to, expects to is the information you're providing to the citizens. But we all know, a year down the road, as you're building it, something might change slightly. So we try to make sure that when we're describing projects, we have that little bit of flexibility in there too. For when it comes back to council and you spend the dollars, you have the authority to approve projects within the scope of the proposition without being, locked in so tight that if something were to change slightly, you can't undertake that project. I went through that really fast. Conclusions: don't spend public money to try to get people to vote yes. Public funds very broad, not just cash. And just be aware of kind of the contract with the voters, and we will certainly work with you. Marty and her team, I see the Hilltop is here, and we've worked on many elections together, and will help you kind of work through the process and answer any questions that you might have. And with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, but I know that was a very quick response.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Council, do you all have any questions in regards to this? No? I do. I have a couple questions. So,
Yes, sir.
if a council representative puts out their own newsletter and includes information about a proposed bond election, or once it's called a bond election, and they can only state items to be included will be propositions A, B, C, D, and E, and state what they are with no opinion in their newsletter. Is that violation?
So let me.
Because you're just communicating
If you're-
information.
So I'll say it depends, and where it depends is: are you spending? Are you using any city funds on that? Is it a city, laptop, a city email address?
No, if they do
Any city
this at
facility.
home, but however, if the city is prepared, let's say they prepared a graphic that has already been shown at a town hall meeting, and they take that graphic and insert it into their newsletter, does that become violation?
So, you're getting. No, the answer is it should not be, because again, it's your own time. You're doing it on your own. And I would say in there, if it was if the mayor, I'm the mayor, but this is my personal opinion. I'm not using city money for this. If you have a newsletter that were to say that, the information when you're deliberating this process, there's another attorney general, it's not attorney, I'm sorry, ethics commission opinion out there where, like when you're deliberating whether or not to call the election, you can have a frank discussion about the need to call it. And that's just part of your deliberation. Once you call it, though, you can't come back the next meeting and rehash why you need it. So in that situation, as long as you're not preparing something, new to be used, and asking the city to prepare something that is either for or against the bond proposition, then I think you're okay. But I will say, I think does the public understand that enough to know not to, that there's a distinction? I don't know that answer.
Well,
But if you're not spending public money, you can't violate the rule.
I don't know that either, and so, but I know that we have council members that do communicate regularly with their residents, and so that's why I'm bringing this up, because I want to make sure that we're all acting appropriately.
Right.
And we can communicate information.
Absolutely.
Taking the position is where we go off the rails.
That's correct. And
And I
again,
understand-
but if you, and I do it, if you go to the Rotary Club for luncheon.
Got that.
You're on your own time. As long as you're not spending public dollars,
Right.
as broad as that's described, you're okay.
Okay.
Let me
Yeah.
interject here real quick.
Yes.
Because one of the things, you said council members, which we all know, council members regularly deal with, communicate with their constituents. One of the questions that may come up, and you have to be careful about, is, while we encourage you, and you're encouraged to use your official city email address, that may become an issue because that's an email server that's
Yes.
served by the city, it's using city resources. So you kind of have to, almost have to make that distinction, do that thing that we often tell you not to do, and that's use a separate email address, which then, of course, creates the kind of issues we've talked about regarding Public Information Act requests, record retention, all that goes with that. So it gets real iffy. So you kind of have to, Pete and I are obviously, as well as Rob, available to, preview any questions you might have on that.
Okay. I'll move on from that. I had one
Yes, sir.
other question, and that was when you were talking about communications that advocate passage or defeat of proposition are prohibited. In the past, we have seen signs that say, vote yes for Prop A, vote no for Prop A. They're advocating a position that put out by individuals.
They're perfectly allowed to do that. That's saying, because you're not using public money, and that's generally where they'll create a public, political, a
Action
PAC.
committee.
And do they have to have a PAC to do that, or could somebody just put a big sign in their yard that says, vote yes?
I might defer to, Kevin, I don't know if
Yeah.
you know that answer.
It-
I know there are rules on it, but
Yeah, because it gets real tricky, again, it kind of gets real tricky with respect to, solicitation of campaign donations and issues like that then come into play if you're going to actually have a true PAC. But I don't know that you necessarily, individuals spending their own money don't have to have one.
Okay.
right.
But if you go start raising campaign funds to, advocate for or against a proposition, you may have to form a PAC in order to avoid some of the campaign funding issues under state law.
All right, just trying to recall things that have been done in the past, and some of which have been done by elected officials, so taking a position. So that is totally against the law at this point.
If they're spending public dollars.
Okay.
So I mean, that's you can't violate the rule unless you're doing both, doing political advocacy for, against, and spending public funds. And that's where where that question arises.
Just want to make sure.
Is someone spending public funds or not? If they're at their home and they, write a handwritten vote yes, vote no sign, I don't think that you're not spending any public money in that scenario. So
Okay.
I think they'd have their First Amendment rights to do as they
Okay.
want to.
And again,
Yes,
let me emphasize, when Rob says spending public money, he also basically also means utilizing public resources that are funded with public funds. That's why I mentioned the email server, for
Yes.
example. You're not spending money when you're communicating, but that's a resource that's been made available through the city's funding. So that's, again, it's a little broader than just saying spending
Sure,
dollars.
right, and
A lot
so
broader.
for another kind of absurd example, there was at a school district, somebody went in before school, used the copier, made some copies, reimbursed the school 5 cents a sheet per their guidelines, took those sheets out, and they were found to be in violation of because they'd spent public money, even though they used they reimbursed the district guidelines, but they were spending money because they were doing things inside the building. If you walk into the break room and stick up a vote yes sign, then you're spending public money. It's very, very broadly interpreted. Now, that doesn't mean you get a fine necessarily. Sometimes you're just found to be in violations of the ethics code and there is no monetary fine. Sometimes there's both. But at the end of the day, what you don't want to have during a bond election generally is someone making a complaint about an ethics violation. So that's why we're always, we try to be careful in how we advise cities. So 'cause we don't want that to happen to anybody in this room.
Well, unless you all have any other questions? No? Thank you. I think this was really good information
Yes,
to
sir.
have, and I read through it quite thoroughly, and I know the others did too, so I appreciate you
And certainly, if there are any
bringing us
follow-up
up to speed.
questions, anytime, just let me know and we'll try to get to the right answer.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Should we start with it?
Or you can have Stacy come up and talk through it.
Yeah, let's never do that. Okay, next up is item A3, which is discuss appointments to Arts and Culture Committee and create a slate list for appointment consideration. Kyrus.
I'm trying to
Zoom
find
in.
it.
Kyra McCarthy.
Kira, yeah, she'll be there for the landscape.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Stacy Henderson, Director of Administrative Services and your City Secretary. Just to start off with Mayor Pro Tem Jackson not available for this study session, we could table it to the next meeting, but since it is almost February, we could also have the option of moving this forward as part of our normal May board appointment workshop, or I'm prepared to move forward with a slate list if you'd like to do that as well.
Obviously, this is an important, these are important considerations for the city. I would like for Councilman Jackson to be here, for his voice to be heard. And we're going to be reevaluating all this in May, I believe?
Yes, yes.
May, so 4
About
months,
3, yeah,
roughly.
almost 3.
I would be personally in favor of waiting till we have a full room, but I'd like to hear what everybody else has to say.
I don't really have a preference.
Fine with me,
Wait,
the delay, sure.
up to, okay.
I think that there, on a couple of the other ones, honestly, the list isn't accurate at this point, but I'm not sure you guys know that yet. So I feel like we may, for that alone, to not waste time, we should probably wait.
I can see both sides of it. I think the question is, on this particular committee, we have fixed positions with Brookhaven and the school district and the firehouse and business, as well as residents. So I think right now, we're obviously short on the resident vote, and so resident voice, if you will. So I can see both sides of it. I think we have several of the terms expired actually last June, so we've kind of kicked the can down the road here. So I think as long as we look at this going forward, we've also talked about the multicultural event team consolidating into some of this as well. So I think we have an opportunity to revisit this going forward. But as long as it doesn't cause any operational problems at the moment, that would be my question. And perhaps looking at Stacy and/or Ben, are there operational problems with this at the moment?
I did check with Maria and Bonnie, the Parks Department liaisons, and they've been functioning fine thus far.
Okay. Well, based on that, then, I think we'd like to wait. And one of the things we probably need to do, we can have some discussion after all this, is put out in branch review or branch email, again, call for interested parties to submit applications to be on some of these boards, because we are running light on applicants and members, so.
Mayor, if I may, I think several of these applicants that we have in the pool now are actually from earlier in the year. And I think not only should we take the action you just proposed, I think that's perfectly fine, but revisit those that we have in the applicant pool to see if they still want to be in that particular list, and thus create a brand-new list dated at some future date.
We did reach out to the applicants. We didn't hear back from each of them. We heard back from a majority of them, but not all of them. So we did reach out to them.
All right, so that will, if we take on, just look at my list here. A3 and A4, and table those, table the appropriate word.
They would just merge into the May normal boards and commissions.
Okay, we'll move those to May, and then that will affect H3 and H4, we will just take off the agenda.
Mayor, I have a quick question related to the ZBA, which is an official body. Do we have to deal with that differently since it is an official body? Maybe that's a legal question.
I'll defer to the attorney or Ben.
I guess one thing I'd need to ask is, where do we stand membership-wise right now, and how many do we have?
One down on ZB.
Just one
One
down?
vacancy.
Okay, so we've got alternates that could fill in the slot if we had a case that came up, and I don't know where we are. Who in the rooms knows?
Danielle.
Sarah or somebody? Where we, do we have any ZBA cases coming up?
We have one on Thursday.
Okay, but we got enough members currently to,
Yeah, because we have the members and we have one alternate.
okay, so we're good right now.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you all for that. So with that, our next item will be A6, discuss the American Rescue Plan Act grant fund reallocation for fiscal 2023.
Oh, about A5.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I highlighted, I circled the wrong one on my list. So please excuse me. The next will be to discuss A5, discuss casting a vote for Farmers Branch in the runoff election for Dallas Central Appraisal District Board of Directors.
Hello, Mayor, Council, Aaron Flores, Deputy Director of Administrative Services, Deputy City Secretary. And so we've been talking about this for quite a while. They're electing a new representative for the Dallas Central Appraisal District. This is just a little timeline for you all. They did make their selections and it triggered a runoff vote, so now we only have 2 to choose from. And I put some of their qualifications of Michael Hurt and Brett Franks. You're welcome to read through that and let me know your decision.
We'll start any discussion from members here on preference of either candidate.
I like, I like Hurt, just based off of his experience.
He's been on since 2008. So he does have the experience in that regard. In reading Mr. Frank's bio that was included in our materials, we did see a little bit of a push for some transparency in the processes and such. Our city has in the past supported Mr. Hurt as well. So I think we're in this, obviously in this particular, most recent, we voted for you, Mayor. However, going forward or going back, we have voted for Mr. Hurt in the past. So I think what I'd like to propose is that we communicate with Mr. Hurt that we'd like to see some interaction perhaps related to the transparency issue that's kind of been posed here. We all know the DCAD rates have gone up. Mr. Hurt has been a member of the board since 2008, so he's certainly seen kind of the inner workings. So it would be very preferable, in my opinion, that we actually have some engagement with him going forward. That would just be my 2 cents. So long and short of it, I think Mr. Hurt sitting there is somebody we could still support.
Mr. Hurt.
Good. Well, obviously, I tried to run for this. I can't change the system if I'm not there. But Michael Hurt has been a longstanding representative for Farmers Branch. I understand that. And I have no issues with him. So I'm hearing preference for Michael Hurt.
Okay, great.
Okay. Now, the next step is A6, discuss the American Rescue Plan Act, grant funding reallocation for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Mayor, Council, Tammy Zimmerman, Director of Finance. So I wanted to give you some background on the ARPA, or American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. This was the COVID-19 public health emergency grants, and there was $350 billion that was released to state, local, and tribal governments. Of that amount, the city of Farmers Branch received $11.9 million. The council did approve funding to allocate 8 projects, with 4 of those projects not yet completed: Hoya, Justice Center, the Branch Connection, and Mercer Park. What I wanted to bring forward in this study session is the allocation of our grant funding and the federal guidelines for spending and reporting of these grants. And what has come to our attention is an issue with Mercer Park. So first, I wanted to go over the timeline. We have some definitive timelines that we have to meet. And these timelines were set by the ARPA State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund rulings by the U.S. Department of Treasury. So in 2021, we were awarded ARPA funds. And during the City Council approval of the budget, the fiscal year 22 budget included the city projects. And as we come up to the end of this year, December 31st of 2024, we must have all of our ARPA funds obligated under contract. And then December 31st of 2026, these ARPA funds must be expensed or liquidated, the obligations liquidated. So the issue that I'm bringing forward to discuss today is the delays we've had with Mercer Park. And there's been a little bit of a dirt pile over there, and there'll need to be some regrading. And I believe there'll need to be a new environmental impact study related to this grading. So that tends to put us out of alignment with our timeline. In order to use the funds by December 31st, 2026, we need to get it under contract by the end of this year, and that may be an issue. So we're suggesting that we reallocate the $1 million that's budgeted for Mercer Park to our Justice Center renovation project. We've already expended $27,500 for the design of Mercer Park, and we're suggesting that that be allocated to administrative cost for ARPA. So our next steps will be to bring forward a resolution in which we would reallocate these ARPA funds. Now, what I also wanted to go over was, as we're coming to near completion of some of these projects, we're doing some cleanup. We have consolidated our reporting with our new grant coordinator. And Cheyenne Jackson, stand up for a minute. She's our newly hired grant coordinator. And all of these reimbursement requests,
contracts, reports, we're all going through with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that we're not leaving any money on the table. So we may have some additional suggestions on Hoya Park, as we have 2 grants that are related to Hoya Park. But as you can see, we budgeted back in 2022, $11.9 million for these ARPA funds. And the 4 remaining projects are listed at the bottom. We did get some additional funding, a little bit more. And we will suggest that go to administrative cost. So again, wanted to bring this before council to have a heads up and discussion on what we're going to try and do and future council meeting. And if there's any questions, I wanted to get feedback.
Thank you, Tammy. As I read this, it was, I guess, my understanding that if we reallocate funds to the Justice Center, then at some point, we will take from our budget and reallocate back to Mercer Park. So it's a net zero
Correct.
to us.
And I did want to point out, and leaving nothing on the table, this isn't an additional burden to our taxpayers. This is simply swapping out what we've already got budgeted with other funding sources. Now it'll be funded with ARPA instead.
Yes. Okay. Council, any questions?
No, that was my clarification there, and I'm good.
Very good. Councilwoman?
I understood that as well. I would just like an update on Mercer Park itself at some point.
That will be forthcoming.
Good. Tammy, if I may ask you to go back one slide where we had the dollar figures. So we're moving the $1 million of city portion here to the Justice Center renovation. That doesn't imply that the Justice Center renovation is now costing $3.5 million, is it?
Well, technically, yes, because we already budgeted 1.3 million in addition to the ARPA 2.5 million to go to the Justice Center. That 1.3 million is in the general fund transfer.
Okay. I think that's exactly what I wanted to hear, that we did have, and this is a similar situation when we had in the bond discussion at the town hall, that we have dollars already allocated for projects. And so moving monies, we're simply aligning those dollars accordingly. So I appreciate the description of already allocating 1.3 to the Justice Center renovation, and this will allow that to be coupled with that. And then, as we've already heard, the dollars for Mercer in the future will be coming out of the general fund, and we'll have to allocate that. Is the expectation that that would come out of the next budgeting cycle? Or would we see a situation to where we might be able to spread that out over multiple budget cycles? And you may not know that answer, and that may go to Tina's question related to an update on that timing aspect.
So it's a good question, and it's a little bit of it's a paperwork shuffle.
Sure.
So if you might recall, in the budget book, we've got a listing of all of our CIP budgets. So right now, we do have Mercer Park funded with that 1 million from ARPA. And then we've got the Justice Center additional amount of 1.3 million coming from the general fund, and that's in their CIP budget as well. So you're just going to flop out the funding sources from those two. They are budgeted, and they're already in there. CIP projects are one of those that when you give them the funds, it may take several years to complete. So it's a life to date of that project where that budgeting goes forward, carries forward.
I think that's a mechanics thing that everyone needs to understand. And I appreciate that description, and hopefully everyone was able to pick up on that nuance, that these are budgeted and we will actually fund those over a period of time. So thank you very much for that clarification.
Any other questions on this item?
Okay.
Very good.
All right, we'll bring it forward in a future council session. Thank you so much.
When does, that has to be done by,
We just need to make sure that we are abiding by the timeline. So if we get the contract, which we hope to have soon with our Justice Center, then we can allocate that budget for ARPA at a future date. It can be February.
okay, well,
There's not a
whatever-
timeline to reallocate.
Sure.
It's just making sure that we've got everything in motion to meet the timelines.
Okay, well, whatever
I
meeting
just
we
want
need
to
to.
make sure the council was aware of what we were doing to make sure we proactively manage the budget and the grants, to not put ourselves in a tough spot later on. So staff identified a potential problem, found the right solution, and brought it to you all for consideration. Looks like you all are in favor, so we'll bring it back as an actionable item in an upcoming council meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Tammy.
Great.
Okay. Next up will be item A7, which is to discuss topics for the City Council Strategic Planning Session.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Jawaria Tareen. And I'm bringing back, it seems like the year went too fast. It seems like the year went too fast. Just a year ago, I was here asking for direction on our strategic planning session and requesting your input for our topics for the strategic planning session. And that's exactly my goal is for today. We are getting ready. We have our State of the City on January 30th, and all of you have a script on your seats with you. We'll talk more about it later, but let's start with our strategic planning, and I'm going to begin with our process. As complicated as it looks, it's not really that complicated. It's similar to how you and I plan our household budget. When we start asking ourselves, what do we need, why do we need it, and how much to meet that need? And this process is exactly similar to our own household budget. But I'm now going to take you to where are we going to have it. It's at Mansky Library this year. It's on February 8th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. We do have a lot of topics, but this is where I need your input. I'm going to leave this slide up here and leave it open for discussion and seek your guidance on these topics. So it's open for discussion now.
So this slide, or these are the items that you would like to discuss?
These are the topics that we are thinking about strategic planning session.
Okay. I would just like to throw in, and I think I mentioned this in November, early November, when we started talking about this. And I challenged everybody to say, what do you want Farmers Branch to be? What's your goal for the city? What do you believe the community needs are? And separate that from community needs versus community wants. Big difference. Big difference. And then also to think about, as we're talking about all of this, is how is housing going to affect our city moving forward? So I'm putting that out as my starting point. And that's where I'm trying to come from in thinking about the budget process and whatnot. Every one of us is going to have our own thoughts and ideas. None are wrong. We're talking about ideas here. So getting them out on the table and having good discussion about whatever percolates to the top, I think is a good thing. So I just want everybody to come and bring good, robust discussion so we can figure out where our road's going to lead us, if that makes sense. And if anybody has any comments on that or would like to share anything else related to this, happy to have that open discussion.
So I took a look at the list in the legislation text, which matches what's up here. And I think it does a good job of summarizing all of the things that are important for us to discuss as we enter our strategic session. I don't think there's anything that I'd like to add.
I think the only thing, and it may fit in there already somewhere, maybe the neighborhood partnership program. But, you know, and we'll talk about it later this evening when we do the landscaping ordinance that's coming through. But for us on our end, what we're doing for aesthetics as people enter, you know, coming down Valley View, close to where you're at, those dead trees, and you could argue that are they dead or are they alive?
We'll find out.
But it's not, you know, they're overgrown and not attractive. And so what does that look like to the entrances of our city, basically? So.
Okay. So I'm not sure where that fits.
Well, I didn't know
You know,
if maybe the neighborhood partnership program, if we could slide that in there, as it's your
We can put it
neighborhood.
we can put it in there, we can add box, we can take boxes away, whatever. That's what I'm gathering from this, so, but we need to note that and have discussion about that.
Okay.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of sub-components to each of these lists. These are what we built based on hearing council discussion as priorities that y'all would like to continue the discussion on. So for example, under public safety, we're going to bring back those radar signs and hopefully have an update for you. So updates on some of the programs y'all talked about as well and want more information on. Parks updates are in there. This sounds like a parks philosophy on the medians. And so that's what I would lump this in, is I'll add to the parks component, which would say, what's the parks philosophy moving forward? And as we do our approaches and medians, and they take great pride in those medians. And so they're excited to have this as a priority for the council to discuss as well. So we'll add that to the parks component that's coming in here for you all.
Yeah, I think Ben and I had the opportunity in our one-on-one in the most recent session to talk about not seeing parks specifically called out here, although we do have it wrapped into the comprehensive plan. You know, Tina just brought up, you know, medians and entryway. I'd like to see parks called out, or maybe the sub-bullets that we could communicate a little broader what some of those elements contain. And I know this will be fleshed out over time, but February the 8th will be here relatively quickly.
Yes.
Martin, you,
Public infrastructure and the financial transparency and budget would be my top two, probably.
all right, well, we're going to address all of this in much deeper detail starting in February, and we'll have as many meetings as we need to in order to get us to a goal. And I think it's real important that, you know, this will provide the roadmap for our staff to execute how our city grows. And so it's very important that we have good input on this. I would say as you're out and about talking with constituents, ask them, what's important to you? What do you want to see from our city? What are we lacking? And just stimulate that conversation and ask the questions and find out what's on people's minds. And then, because that's what we're going to be bringing to this planning process.
Okay. Very well. Like Ben said, that we're working on this list, and we do have sub-items under each item, but we're working on those, and we'll bring it back to you. Our next steps is we'll meet on 8th for our strategic planning session. Staff will take it back, discuss, and we'll update you with the item that we discussed on the 8th and on the 20th study session. And then March will be the departments, where our department head get together and they put their initiatives together. And from that point, we'll get into our budget alignment process. But this is all I had for you today. Thank you.
Yeah, go up to the timeline schedule again. You know, that's, or February. 8 months. 8 months. So it's not all going to get done in a day. We're going to have a lot of discussion about it, and there may be items that we go back and forth about, but this is your thinking cap that you've got to put on for the next 8 months as an elected official to help us determine where we're going, what we want to be.
I think the key component here also is this starts the budget process. So from here, we get your priorities and the staff starts building a budget based on those priorities. So depending the feedback we get from council, staff will immediately start working towards the budget. You'll see lots of small budget bite-sized meetings again. But again, we want to build this based on council's direction. So probably the most important meeting for staff is building this component up as we start the budget discussions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is item A8, discuss and approve feedback regarding draft landscape amendments to the comprehensive zoning ordinance.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Kira McCardle. Work as a consultant to the Planning Department, and I've been working on a set of landscape amendments to the CZO, a new set of regulations. And I'm here to present them to you today. What we're looking for today is, of course, to answer your questions, but also to get feedback from you so that we can finalize the draft and bring it forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council for adoption. So the feedback that we're looking for is, do you feel that we're meeting the mark and meeting your expectations in terms of what we're proposing to require? Are we requiring too much landscaping, not enough? We're proposing to introduce residential landscaping. Do you like the way that we've handled that? Or would you like for us to look at it in a different light? So please keep that in mind as we go through the presentation, and I'll try and go through it quick so we have some time for questions and discussion. So why are we doing landscape amendments? There are several reasons, but some of the bigger reasons are the city has adopted some new policy in the last few years, particularly the Farmers Branch 2045 Comprehensive Plan and the Sustainability Plan. And we want our regulations to support that policy. That will help the city meet its goals. If we adopt a policy that says we should have a beautiful city, but we don't have regulations that support us, it becomes more difficult for us to meet that goal. In addition, this is in response to comments from the previous planning zoning commissions and cities and city councils to relook at our landscape regulations. And also there was a desire expressed to bring our regulations forward and be more reflective of current best practices and more reflective of standards that we see within the DFW. In terms of objectives, we've rewritten the objectives into 8 objectives that are summarized here on the screen. And those 8 objectives are aimed to be reflective of those conversations and directions from the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. They're also aimed to be reflective of the direction that we've taken, that we've gotten from the comprehensive plan and from our sustainability plan. And they will set a lens through which the reader and staff will look at the landscape regulations and provide some context to those regulations. In terms of plan requirements and installation and maintenance, we haven't changed a lot in these sections. What we have done is try to really clarify what the city expects in terms of technical requirements and ongoing maintenance requirements for landscaping within the city. So we're trying to eliminate some of those gray areas and be really clear about what the city would like to see. One addition is the requirement of an irrigation plan at application stage. This is really a regional standard that most cities are requiring, and it's to ensure that irrigation systems that are installed in our non-residential, so not single-family or two-family residences, are meet best practices and have things such as raise freeze sensors, and are also located appropriately around the lot. Residential requirements, this would be a new requirement for landscaping regulation. Our current landscaping regulations do not deal with residential landscaping. This would not apply to current residences in the city. It would kick in or start to apply when a dwelling is demolished to be rebuilt or when a new residential lot is established. And what we're proposing to do is to require a number of trees based on the minimum lot size. So an R1 lot, which is our largest lot size in the city, and it's the minimum size of 1 acre, would require 9 trees or tree replacement. So that first tree would be required to be within the front yard setback, so we get those aesthetics on the street within the neighborhood. And the other trees could be located elsewhere on the lot. Also, trees could be swapped out for a shade tree could be exchanged for 2 ornamental trees or 1 ornamental tree and 4 shrubs. So this provides some flexibility for landowners when they are considering landscaping on their lot. The smallest lot size would be D2, so that's a 2-family residential district, and it would require 2 trees. If it's developed as a duplex, that's 1 tree per unit, or if it's developed as a single-family home, that's 2 trees total. We're also proposing, as sort of to introduce a residential tree credit program. This is something that we see in a lot of cities in the region, and what it does is it's meant to help to retain mature trees within the city. So if a residential lot is being redeveloped and the lot owner retains some existing mature trees on the lot, they're able to use that and get a credit for the size of the tree towards their landscaping requirement. So for example, if a lot owner has an R1 lot and they redevelop the lot and they retain a tree that has a DBH or a diameter at breast height of 25 inches, they get credit for 4 trees. So they're only required to put in 5 additional trees on that lot. In terms of multifamily and non-residential, our current standard is that we require 5% of the sites that's not covered by buildings to be landscaped. I do want to note that when compared with other cities in this region, I didn't see any other cities that had a requirement that was currently this low. So we are proposing to increase that requirement to be more reflective of what we do see in other cities. But we are also trying to provide some flexibility and several tools that developers can use to help to meet that goal. So we are proposing that we require 20% of a lot to be landscaped. In multifamily, not all that landscaping needs to be on the ground floor. It can be on some of the upper floors, as many of the amenity spaces are not always on the ground floor. In addition, up to 40% of that landscaping can be in the form of amenity spaces, either open to the public or for residents only. So those could be pool areas or barbecue areas, things of that nature. For non-residential, so that would be the commercial, industrial, or institutional uses, up to 20% of the lot the required landscaping can be met through the use of pervious surfaces. So if you install a walkway that is done with a pervious material or a patio for staff in the back of the building, that can count towards your landscaping requirement. It still helps us meet our stormwater goals as the city, which is one of the goals for the landscaping. So it is still of benefit, still helping to meet some of the objectives of the landscaping regulations. In addition, for either multifamily or non-residential properties, if you install a number of either sustainable or enhanced landscaping elements in your property, you can be eligible for a 5% reduction in the total site coverage that's required. Just one more note about non-residential properties. We are also looking to require that 50% of landscaping be within the front yard. This is a regional standard that you see done by a lot of cities, and it's to ensure that landscaping is brought to the front. So the front door of businesses is really attractive, and the streetscape, it adds to the attractiveness or aesthetics of the streetscape as well. Parking lot landscaping, we are looking to update our required screening for surface parking lots. Right now, we require some vertical landscaping to break up portions of lots that may be visible from the public street. What you see more often as a best practice now is that a screening row of hedges is put in place. This prevents lights from cars shining into the public roadway if it's nighttime. So we've updated that, and we're also proposing to require interior parking lot landscaping at a level of 10% of the interior lot. That would count towards the landscaping requirement, and it would be met through landscape islands at the end of each row, and also landscaping islands that would break up long rows of parking spaces. If a lot was small in size, 10 spaces or less, it would not require interior landscaping. And also, if it was a warehousing use or something of that nature, loading areas and things related to the business would not directly related to the business would not be required to be landscaped. In terms of our plant requirements and lists, we've updated some references. We make reference to, there's an image here from the Texas Tree Planting Guide. It provides great direction to landowners or to landscape architects who are using the regulations on where to plant trees and how much space is required to trees. So we've provided that for residents and professionals. In addition, the Planning and Zoning Commission did establish a landscaping subcommittee. And on that subcommittee, there were several master gardeners who worked very hard and diligently to update our approved plant list. So it has been expanded greatly, and we think it will be a good tool for landscape architects to use when doing landscape plans for the city. And the plants that were chosen were carefully chosen to be appropriate for the region and the local climate. So with that, our next steps are to incorporate any comments and feedback that we get from you as council today, and then to go through a review with our attorneys, and then we hope to bring this back for a public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission and council. So with that, are there any questions or comments?
Thank you, Kyra. Council, start with Councilman Merritt. Questions, comments?
All right, thank you for the presentation. Back on the last slide, we had the plant and requirements and lists. The draft in the second bullet limits a single tree or shrub species to 1/3. So that implies that you're going to have at least 3 different varieties of plantings, if you will. Help me understand that, because if I planted hollies, and I think Linda in the room, she probably would throw something at me if I did. But if I only planted one thing as a shrub species, I wouldn't be meeting the draft if I'm reading this correctly. Is that fair?
I think it's looked at as a total. So, I mean, if you're looking at shrubs, I think if you're doing a hedgerow, and we can clarify the text within the regulation as well. A hedgerow we would want to be of a single species, but what we are really looking at is tree species. We want to have some variety of tree species, particularly shade tree species, and that's so that it provides a variety, a difference in foliage and canopy shape and things of that nature. But it also helps if things like disease start to come into some of the trees. It can't spread as quickly to other trees within the lot or adjacent lots.
Okay. Thank you for that response. And I know that the material, the ordinance was provided, and so I also looked a little bit at the process on how either a developer or a resident would have to, who's engaging in this, would have to deal with that. And that would all come through operationally with the planning staff, is that correct?
Yeah, it would be through planning or community services, through a combination of those two departments. If it does come through community services, planning is often flagged to get involved and to look at the landscaping portion. But yes, primarily those two departments.
Okay, thank you. Just scanning my notes quickly. I'm pretty comfortable and I'm excited that we're actually moving forward with this. I think from communication, we've said all along that, and you emphasized it again in the presentation, that this is not applicable to existing residents, only those that are redeveloping their particular lot or new properties that are be established. And then obviously with the development of commercial, we'll have that process being now baked into all of these particular proposals going forward. So I think emphasizing that so we don't get any resident nervousness, if you will, that we're making them plant multiple trees and et cetera. It's certainly part of the communication of going forward. But I think we're actually catching up with our partner cities around the Metroplex and actually doing a very good job of emphasizing landscaping, raising the bar, if you will. So thank you for all the work that you put in and all those behind the scenes and the subcommittees that have worked this hard on this particular project. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Baird.
David answered the one question I had. Generally, this feels way too much like an HOA for me to support. I would much rather not have requirements and have to encourage people to do things instead of requiring them. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Very good.
I agree with Martin. Not only did I get an HOA feel from it, but some of these plants are cost prohibitive. They can't be purchased at a Home Depot or Lowe's. You have to go to specialized nurseries to get them. And so, I just don't know that that's what we want to leave the flavor of the day for with our residents or our commercial businesses coming in. So.
Very good. Councilman.
So, so while reading this, I felt really overwhelmed. It was like trying to remember all the how far ahead or behind your property line, or how many trees, what types of trees, the height. It was a lot. And I mean, if I'm feeling overwhelmed as somebody who's making a decision about this, I can only envision how somebody who, if this were to pass in its current form, how they might feel or perceive this. And I mean, in here, my second note that I wrote in here, which I already kind of thought of when I was reviewing it the first time, was HOA-like. And so I've got some concerns about giving off that feel. I don't think it's our place to cross that line to the point where people feel like we're an HOA. So that's the concern I have there. I do have a question. So let's say somebody redeveloped their property under this current ordinance, and they, the way that they built their home, they conformed exactly with the letter of this ordinance. Then they decide, I don't like that tree anymore, I'm just going to cut it down. What happens then? Who's responsible for monitoring that they're still remaining compliant?
That would be codes would be responsible for that, and usually that's on a complaint basis. Currently, is my understanding. There's nothing necessarily in here saying that landscaping couldn't be changed. What you would have to do is replace that tree in another location to remain compliant. I don't think we're looking to go after people with sticks, I guess. And I would say, I guess I would say in terms of compliance for residential properties, particularly if there was to be a complaint or any follow-up, it would be through codes, and it would be on a complaint basis. And that goes the same, I think, for our commercial and industrial lots. Currently, it is codes who would follow up if there's a violation. But we do take those violations a bit. We do try and ensure that our commercial industrial lots are in compliance with regulation.
So I guess if somebody tried to file a complaint, they would have to know that this specific home that they're filing a complaint on was one that was built after the passing of this ordinance, because it's only for redeveloped property. So,
Yeah.
and it would be difficult for somebody in code enforcement, if they were driving by, to address another concern, or just were driving by and saw that there was maybe, I guess they wouldn't know. They would have to look up specifically that this home, I mean, there would be a lot of information that needed to have been known before a code officer drove by. Whereas now, let's say there's trash outside that's been put out before the date they were supposed to be put out for bulk. That would be something that they would immediately know, because it applies to everybody uniformly in a specific area. Whereas this is not something that, it just seems like it's going to be really cumbersome to enforce. It seems like people are going to have to conform to this at the inception, but if no one complains, then they can back out of it after their house is built. So I've got that concern as well. And then I worry about it being cost prohibitive as well. So I don't know if there's maybe a better way that we can achieve our goal, that may not raise the red flags that we've brought up. What I got.
Okay, thank you. Kyra and any of the committee members that may be tuning in, you asked at the very beginning, what do we require? And is it too much or too little? And I thought about that, and I feel like I'm in a very unique position to think about that, because I'm building a new house. And when this was first being discussed and they were trying to rush something through, I actually cut down 32 trees on a lot in order to build my house. Many of them had to go because they were diseased. Some had to go because they were in the footprint of the house. Some had to go because they would have been in the footprint of where driveway was going to be. So I was really, it killed me to do it. And then the only one tree that I wanted to truly save ended up splitting, and it had to come down. So I feel like I'm understanding of the goal, but I want to share, but I'm basing my opinions off of more of my personal experience than anything else at this point. So if you'll allow me just to go through a few things. Obviously, what we're working with is a draft, and plans change as construction takes place. You know, one of our goals as a council and as a city is to encourage redevelopment and encourage people in certain areas to take homes down and rebuild them. And I think to put another layer of requirements on top of what is already expected in the investment that people are already making maybe become a little bit burdensome or too onerous, in my opinion. Now, for someone to submit a landscape plan when they're submitting their construction plans, I believe might be an overreach, only because I could submit a rough plan with my house plan, but as you know, once construction starts and you see things actually develop out of the ground, then things take on a different appearance. And what is drawn on paper doesn't always work in the real world. So there's got to be some room for change there. And that I'm addressing 4.1, Section D2. Then I read over Section 4.1E2, Section A, and, it mentioned approval of the director. Well, I'm not sure who the director is or what education the director has in order to rule on whether something meets a specific specification or not. And then what recourse does the homeowner have if they are not in agreement? So that was a little concerning to me. On section 4.1 F, section F, establishment, it says all landscape areas shall be provided with a readily available water supply with at least one outlet located within 100 feet of all plant materials to be maintained. Well, if you have one of the larger estate
So-
lots and you're going to redevelop that lot, it's typical that the builder would place a hose bib on each wall, exterior wall, so you would have at least 4. But that in and of itself might not be in agreement with this particular section. So again, I'm just trying to use what I'm going through, and I did try to address a lot of this because I wanted to make sure if I was going to water something, I had hose bibs on every wall. I think I had like 6 or 7 of them, just so we can move hoses around if needed. On section 8, it talked about a violation of this, or this being violation of zoning ordinance, and but it didn't say what the penalty is. So I'm just looking for clarification. On section J, what if none of those species are used by a particular resident redeveloping their property? Again, something to consider.
Mayor Lynn, just to add a point of clarification, I believe that is the current zoning ordinance that we're looking at right there for site development standards, chapter 94, article 4,
Okay.
not the draft one. That's the existing standards.
Okay. But
Yes, I
well,
was going to make the same.
still
I think
applies.
you're referencing the current landscape regulations.
I should say still would be a valid concern.
Sure, with the draft watermark, Marcus Narvaez, Deputy Director.
Okay.
That's actually the ordinance that's being presented, that will be presented.
Okay.
It has the watermark.
Well,
The other one that you were citing, Mayor, that's the current.
okay, then I'll make just a couple more comments based on the actual presentation that we walked through. And on page 3 of that presentation, item number 7 was mandate drought tolerant local plants to minimize watering and increase survival. Again, we're mandating landscape. When does local government stop and let people run their own lives? That's my question. So I'm not, I in my own soul, I think it's a overreach to mandate that you have certain plant material on your lot when you're redeveloping a property. You've just probably and my guess is going to be anybody who's redeveloping a property in Farmers Branch, they're probably going to spend between $500,000 and maybe $2 million. And now we're going to mandate that they have to have X, Y, or Z.
Well,
Okay, and that
Right.
just concerns me.
And from my experience, because the coral honeysuckle is on here, and I love it, and it's our area. I planted 2 of them this year, they're both dead. Couldn't keep them alive. So that's theory. This is theory. That isn't practical. That doesn't mean because it's zoned to our area that they're survivable. You know, I mean, so, and that's following these guidelines. I put the coral honeysuckle in, 2 of them, neither survived. So this is theory. So that's why I struggle with it. This just isn't practical. And like you said, as you build it up and different dirts, different areas, a mile away from each other, just may not live. It may
Well,
not be survivable.
I understand that, and that makes me go back to when they had the, I don't know if it was the League of City, TML was here. They had a big conference here, and they had exhibitors, everything from all types of city equipment and services and whatnot. Well, Texas A&M Extension was there, and they were giving away free trees. And so I went up, they had 3 types of trees they were giving away. I saw that they were giving away Vitex. I said, I love that. I love that purple. I want one. She says, where do you live? And I said, I live in Farmers Branch. And she goes, yeah, I'm not giving you one. I'm like, what? And she says, well, it's sort of an invasive tree, and we don't want those. We, them, don't want those in this area. We have them right outside City Hall. Residents have them all over the city. They're beautiful trees. So again, somebody telling me what I can or can't plant on my lot, that didn't sit very well. And I just think it's especially when we're trying to attract people to our city to help us redevelop our city and upgrade our housing in various areas. These requirements are very onerous and could maybe an overreach by local government. So
What did everybody else?
I'm going to leave that, but I am going to say one thing regarding multifamily or non-residential, because this is, to me, is one of the biggest issues that we have. Planning and zoning and city council need to look at anything that is going to be redeveloped, or not even developed and/or redeveloped, that abuts a single-family neighborhood, needs to have a thick tree or vegetation screening, because what is happening, and you're going to hear about it, is we're going to have structures that are 4 or 5 stories tall looking down into the backyards of single-family homes. Nobody wants that. Unfortunately, the thought process just wasn't there when that was developed, but we have the opportunity to change that now. Marcos, we've had discussion about that, and we need to do whatever we can to encourage development, but at the same time, preserve the value of single-family homes that are next to these types of buildings, as much as we can.
What did everybody else's thoughts on G3C?
I don't know what,
The certificate of occupancy in case where the city manager or designee determines that it is impractical to undertake planting due to a seasonal consideration, a probable survivability of the plants, that the city manager or designee may issue a CO provided the applicant posts a letter of credit or deposits cash in an escrow account. That's on page 4 of the draft.
Okay, draft.
Comes down to the operational issues, and that was the press that I made on
Yeah.
how these are going to be worked out.
Yeah.
It just seems all far too complicated.
I can't speak to that particular provision though, because we have that in quite a number of ordinances in other cities that have landscape regulations. In part, that's to serve security, to make sure that the plan. What happens is you get a summer like we had this past summer. Somebody's developing, they're trying to get their CO, and you sure as heck don't want to be putting in new plant materials in 3 weeks of 100-degree plus weather. And so it's a means to basically secure the performance of the developer
understand.
to put it in there. It does get a little complicated because we do have to do some, we have to review a letter of credit. Somebody on staff has to determine the cost estimates for the plants and the materials and all that. And so there is a little bit of administrative burden, but it just ensures. So, I mean, that's the rationale for it. Good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just telling you the rationale. Whether it's something you ought to do, obviously, it's a policy decision.
But I'll say, I think the general direction is good. And we want to encourage people to plant on their lots, okay? I think when we start narrowing the scope of what is available to them, then that, in my mind, presents a problem because what I like may not be what my next door neighbor likes. And
I think they've given you a broad scope of what's in play, and I think it's an advantage from what we had in the past where we had a very short list. And so now we have a much broader list. So I think that's helpful. I think you guys have heard me sit in this chair numerous times. Operationally, how does this work? And I think that's what's missing at the moment. On operationally how this will work, I think we understand that they'll come before, if you're redeveloping a lot or new development, from a commercial standpoint. But there are a lot of these aspects in the 19 pages of the draft. How is that going to work? Who's going to be responsible for it? And I think that, to me, is where the rubber hits the road from the council. How do we know that this is going to be, executed the same way consistently, time in, time again? And I don't see that yet. And so that's my feedback. And I think the concerns are valid there are a lot of moving parts here. And residential, only new residential from a tear down perspective, commercial, multifamily, parking lots. I mean, now you have to think of all the use cases, and from a project management standpoint, you've got to figure out what is. And you become that giant game of Plinko, and I've used that before, that it bounces down and you have to figure out how big is your Plinko board and how far down. And when it becomes so complicated, and as others have pointed out, we don't always get the intended result. And that's the concern that I think several of us, maybe the majority of us, all of us, are sharing at the moment.
If I could add, just Incure before you answer. So this is all valid. Everything that I've heard today, this is all good. This is exactly what we need to hear. Because the question is how stringent do we want to be, or how lax do we want to be in a lot of this? And I can give you 100% assurance, anything that gets developed in our city requires a site plan. If it's a single-family house requires a site plan. If it's a commercial development, requires a site plan. Right. Every single one of those site plans can be reviewed by the planning department also. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to go through the planning department, but it still can be reviewed by the planning department. So operationally, and Kevin knows this, I've worked with Kevin for a long time, this is how we did it in Midlothian for the longest time. Not necessarily how we do it here, but it isn't to say that it couldn't be a way we do things when it comes to single-family homes also. And planning still has a review process and looking at these single-family homes. But again, I understand that this ordinance really isn't intended to hurt residents or businesses. It's really just a way of trying to keep up with how other cities do landscaping. Also, if we want to be more lax, if we want to stay the status quo, I think we're fine with that also. But we do want to, I need 4 votes, essentially. So I got to convince 4 of y'all that this is a good thing for the city. So absolutely, I think it's best that me and Kira, we take this back, we take the comments back. We'll re-look at everything. We do have a subcommittee that they live and die by plants. Like, this is what they do. Some of the species might be, like you said, a little bit more complicated to acquire or maybe to take care of. But, you know, we do want to make this something that you guys feel comfortable with and, you know, planning is comfortable with also as well.
So Marcos, to that point, maybe what you do, have Jeff section out our little discussion about this and email it to them, so to the committee members and the subcommittee members. I know one subcommittee member really well, and I trust her opinion, but I want to make sure that we're not overstepping our bounds. That's my concern.
No, absolutely.
Okay, and we heard a number of other concerns here from council members. So, you know, there's no rush to do this.
Absolutely.
But, so let's take our time and reevaluate what was heard today, and then we can come back and look at the next draft, and we'll get there.
Oh, I think so. I think it's finding the balance. We want to find a balance where nobody feels that this is an HOA, you know, or
Yeah.
that, you know, again, that we still can have a kind of a robust landscape requirement in our city too, that just, you know, we like trees, we like grass, we want to see people plant this stuff and it not look, you know, apocalyptic or anything like that in our city. We want to see nice vegetation. So, yeah, we'll definitely, we can bring this back. We'll do some digging on our own on our side, and we'll talk to our subcommittee and report back to you.
So Marcos, just to be clear, before it goes to the public hearings at P&Z or council, we will have another study session to make sure we're on the right path. I hate to waste the public hearing times. Okay.
Absolutely. No. We did have this scheduled to go to a public hearing for the Planning and Zoning Commission, but I think we want to bring this back as another study session.
Well, I think at least one more. So.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And let me just, again, thank the committee members and subcommittee members. I know they put a lot of time and effort into trying to get this right. And so we're much closer than we were.
I think so.
So thank you. Okay. Next up is
Thank you.
A11, discuss future agenda items. I'll start with Councilman Merritt.
Yes, I have one for the group, and Ben, this is one that we spoke about, so it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
Recently, we all read where Walmart has announced drone delivery in the North Texas area, and therefore I would like a study session item related to drone, I guess, activity and what we can expect. I understand that Dallas County has an unmanned aircraft and robotics technology program that is apparently leading this, along with the North Texas Innovation Alliance. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to be educated on what is happening both in the business world and other government and agencies, entities that are focusing on this. And it would be an opportunity for us to educate our residents and ourselves on when we see, you know, a drone delivery and who oversees that and where are the lines of responsibility. And so
You have somebody that can come in and speak to that?
I don't, but I could certainly work with and get that lined up.
Okay, it might be good.
I'd be happy to work on that. But I think if they're going to be delivering, Walmart, for example, delivering to 1.8 million folks, we're going to see more of this. We already know that in Louisville and Frisco, they've been running programs already. And I think there are 11 other cities. Richardson's involved in this as well. So I just think we need to understand where the drones are coming from and how they're traversing our city, all of those questions. So I'd be
We might be.
interested in that.
Councilman Merritt, just for timing on this one, since it's new territory, are you okay with April or so as we start working on it?
It can come down the road, but I think we've pushed some of these future agenda items down, but I think I'd like to at least have it on the radar, no pun intended, with drones flying in the, you like that one? I tried. We will. There you go. Thank you.
All right,
That's all
thank
I
you.
had.
Very good, very good. Councilman Bear.
Nothing this week.
Okay, Councilman.
As
Woman.
I had spoken with Ben about the searchability of the website, and we have a meeting at 3 on Tuesday. If anybody is interested in that.
Wait a minute, say
But,
that again. I
the
didn't.
searchability of our website.
Okay,
And then some other technology. So we're going to talk about that on Wednesday, but I feel like from that conversation, I'm going to want that on the future agenda item.
All right, I'd like to attend. Ben, you know, I've had a couple of ideas that we floated in the last couple of sessions related to that. So. Tuesday at 3.
I'll put it on your calendar.
Thank you.
okay. Councilman Roman.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that maybe we can add, there's already an agenda item for demo rebuild program. If we can maybe add a component of the Renaissance program to that discussion and discuss the strategy of that as well, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Or if it needs to be a separate agenda item, that's fine too. I just thought it might be a natural fit.
Absolutely. We'll add it to it.
That's it.
Thank you.
Ben, can we get a survey out to the west side for the twice-a-week trash pickup?
Absolutely. That's
I mean, I think I'd like it to be more robust than just asking, do you want twice a week? What are their needs? So,
Okay. I only have one thing that I'll share with you. Hugs Cafe, which is based in McKinney, is they are basically a cafe run by adults who have maybe some type of disability. Okay, they have a partnership with Dallas College. Their culinary and hospitality center. Their inaugural kickoff was this past Wednesday. We have been invited to a mock lunch on March 7th at 11:45. And staff as well, we got room for 12, where 8 students will cook us a dinner, serve it to us, and obviously clean up. They'd like to get our feedback on their food. They've been working really hard to do this, and so I'm putting that out there. I hope that you all, as your schedules allow, can make time on March 7th at 11:45 at Dallas College. I'll get you more specific address here in the coming days to do this.
Mayor, would you like the city secretary's office to coordinate with RSVPing schedules for everyone?
That'd be great.
Okay. Stacy will take the lead and we'll get it taken care of.
Okay. And so with that, we will adjourn our study session at 4:43 and see everybody downstairs for a council meeting.
Dinner is here.